With HBO's new show Chernobyl currently airing, I thought what better time to delve back in and review the S.T.A.L.K.E.R franchise. But after I started making my notes, I found that all of the things that I really love about the game are a lot of the same things that crop up in people's main complaints. So rather than doing a full review of the game, I thought I'd do a rundown of the top 7 things that, for me at least, make S.T.A.L.K.E.R one of my favourite games of all time, and probably the reasons why a lot of people won't like it. Number 1. Inaccurately accurate combat. I remember when I first played Shadow of Chernobyl, I thought that I was doing something wrong. The first encounter you will have in the game will have you clearing out an enemy camp, and you will soon realise that the aiming, well, it just doesn't really work. Armed only with a basic pistol, shooting from a distance will probably connect about as well as putting a square peg in a round hole. Your best bet is to try and get as close as possible and let off a few shots around the head area and hope for the best. It could be an incredibly off-putting opening, and if you are used to games where you are basically Iron Man fighting bad guys made of tissue paper, you are going to be hitting that reload key more often than you reload your pistol. It can also prove frustrating to get shotgun blasted from across the map from an unknown crack shot, resulting in instant death. We go in thinking that we know how to play a first-person shooter, but quickly realise that this game has its own rules that we need to play by, and that we need to forget what we have come to expect from other FPS games, which brings me on to... Number 2, the game fits into a genre it isn't designed around one. Unfortunately, the way of the gaming world has been turned slightly upon its own head. It used to be that games were designed around a unique concept and then were labelled with a genre based on the content. Now games are created to fit a genre and blueprint that is known to be popular, and they often come across as lacking in imagination. Like they are the product of a robot designing a game off of an algorithm which calculates what it thinks will appeal to people based on what people are currently playing. But S.T.A.L.K.E.R doesn't go for any of that. It has its own mechanics and bonkers concept, which just happen to sit within the first-person RPG genre. There is nothing less immersive than picking up a game and knowing exactly what to do, and this is mostly prevalent with open world games, which have adopted a horrible habit of requiring you to do fetch quests, craft items, and go to key locations to expand the map. And that can be perfectly fine if done well, but it also makes me feel like I'm just doing a bit of box ticking. S.T.A.L.K.E.R, conversely, doesn't directly follow the rules and expectations from the genre. There are fetch quests and camps to clear, but they aren't ever really aimed at you. They're almost coincidental, and every encounter in the game seems like you've just stumbled across it as if by accident. And often you have, due to... Number 3. Predictably unpredictable AI. You will seldom have the same experience playing S.T.A.L.K.E.R on multiple playthroughs, and that is down to how the game's world and inhabitants have been designed. There are trigger points in the game that require you to have done a quest or spoke to an NPC to initiate the game further, but how these play out can manifest in completely different ways due to how the characters behave. It's almost like the programmers gave your allies and enemies reaction-based AI, but didn't build in any restrictions. For example, you might be cautiously exploring a radioactive car when you hear a call come in asking you to aid with an attack happening over the other side of the map. You probably won't get there in time, but your camp members will finish the fight and praise you for your assistance. The game sort of runs into itself, and weird scenarios play out as little anomalies, and it might be an oversight in the game's structure, but it really helps to immerse you in what's going on. Because your existence in this world is coincidental, your weapons are rubbish, you can't hit anything, and you die pretty much instantly. It almost makes you want to slip by unnoticed while the game concludes its hazardous encounters. It's unpredictable is what I'm getting at, and that's precisely the feeling you want instilled from a game set in the wake of a nuclear meltdown. Other games might surprise you with what is an unexpected yet scripted event, but this kind of makes it up as it goes along, and this is only made more immersive by the land we have to traverse. Number 4. An open world that doesn't invite you to explore it. S.T.A.L.K.E.R is kind of open world, but at the same time it isn't. You can follow a pretty linear critical path to progress the main missions and story, but if you try to venture outside of your objective, you're going to get hit by a hurdle pretty early on. Scattered throughout the game's land are pockets of radiation that will kill you pretty quickly if you venture to them, traps that can kill you, enemy camps, barriers, mutants, bridges, and weird balls of energy that turn you into a crisp. You are almost punished for wanting to venture out into the game's world, and this isn't because there simply isn't anything out there. Where the game becomes most exciting is finding a new location, but it is how you get there that is rewarding and fraught with caution. Most often, finding your way around a radiation pocket, over or around an enemy camp, or down into an underground bunker is done in a way that makes you feel like you weren't supposed to do it, and that you have somehow figured out a glitch in order to proceed further than you should be. Exploring these sections can be quite tense, as you will have often strayed far from your objective and really don't know what to expect. This is also exacerbated by the fact that you never truly feel properly outfitted for any situation. Number 5. Realistic character growth. In the early game, you are pretty useless, and this is mainly down to having rubbish equipment. The game never feels the need to actually tell you how to bolster your arsenal. In fact, it doesn't really tell you how to do anything, but as you raid camps and find loot, you will collect a large inventory of different weapons, most all of which will be in poor condition and will jam and be inaccurate. Visiting vendors will have weapons that you probably can't afford, and all of the items that they hold are completely random, So you might see a sniper rifle in the early game, or nothing but energy drinks and a gas mask. It wouldn't be uncommon on your first playthrough to not hit the flow with how you can upgrade, repair and sell your items, as it really is not obvious. You have to find your own feet, source the right people to speak to who can perform the right tasks, and even then they might send you off into the world to find the right tools in order to do it for you. The game holds a lot back, and the first time that I played through it, I wasn't even aware that I could upgrade my weapons. It was content that was lost to me, as it was never really hinted towards. Where the game shines though, is that it isn't your character that gets better and becomes a big powerhouse, it's you as the player who progresses and gets better at understanding how the game's world works. If you know what you are doing, you can hit the ground running pretty early on, make sure you collect the right loot and be able to afford things like basic scopes, better armour, and keep your weapons in good condition. Scopes make the combat a little bit easier, but it is still difficult, as it should be. You will only ever get marginally better at playing S.T.A.L.K.E.R, and this again is what makes the game one of the most immersive experiences, because your experience fits in with the world it is trying to portray. You have to adapt in order to survive, but not in ways that are led by story or dialogue. It's almost as if Chernobyl blew up inside the game's code itself, and you have to tread lightly in order to figure out where the pieces are going to land. Number 6. Subtlety of progression. You are never really too sure how far along you actually are, and this is because as you ramp through the story missions, you won't notice any significant changes to your character or the world around you as the result of the story. Everything in the game feels like a bit of a side plot until you take stock of what you have achieved in the game running up to that point. Despite being the Marked One, the Russian nuclear equivalent of Harry Potter, you are not the main focus of what is going on here, and often combat is done between teams of camp members. You are mainly along for the ride, and as time goes on your biggest indication to where you currently sit in the narrative is your arsenal of weapons, armour and ammunition. You'll never feel completely competent, but things start to change by having a radiation suit which lets you traverse to new locations previously shrouded by death. Bigger and more stable weapons will help clear out mutant-infested lands and enemy camps, and looted PDAs and USB sticks will start to build up the game's story. What you are actually doing is all of the same things that are present in all open-world FPS RPGs: killing bad guys, collecting loot, getting better, finding plot items, and expanding the map. But whilst you are doing all of those things, they are delivered to you in a way that doesn't seem like they are intended to be done, which kind of gives the feeling of doubt to everything that you do in the game, and that's what makes it so enthralling. A first time player might be hit with the urge to start again, because it is a blind wade through mud to feel like you are playing correctly, but sticking with it you'll after time come to take count of how all the little coincidental encounters you had, items you collected and places you explored, help to build your character and walk you through the plot. 7. Gloom and Doom. This is a depressing game. Often it's raining, everything is dirty, the environment is toxic, death lies around every corner, and the music is more ambiently haunting than something resembling a composition. And paired with the uncompromising design of the world, how things just appear to happen without your intervention and the hostility of everything around you, you feel trapped in this repressive land for the entirety of your time playing it. And this only really gets worse as time goes on. There is a constant underlying level of tension that is present wherever you are, and this can really ramp up if you find yourself out at night time with something close by that you can't see. One encounter in particular proved edge of seat worthy, where one of the bloodsucker enemies who can turn invisible was chasing me around about 2 AM in the morning. I had no way of telling where he was, so I went and stood on a rock in the lake and anxiously waited for sight of water rippling. This worked in my favour until 2 more showed up, so I legged it back to somewhere less deadly. You never feel too safe, so often you make haste from point to point, meaning that you rarely feel the lethargy of mindless wandering around or waiting for something to happen. It is one of the few games that makes me forget that I'm actually playing a game, and changes my thought process to how am I going to proceed in this world, rather than what can I do to beat the gameplay mechanics. All of the things that I've listed in these 7 sections I can see as being marked down as the game's bad points from someone with a different perspective. I mean, who wants to play a depressing game with no clear indication of where to go, where you miss your targets most of the time and enemies will fight without you? I bloody do, that's who.